You've got big projects to tackle, but your day gets swallowed up by repetitive tasks and constant inquiries. It's hard to make progress when you're stuck putting out fires. That's where Element 451's AI assistants come in. Acting like an extra set of hands, you get your time back for the high-impact projects. Ready to reclaim your time? Visit element451.com/AI team to learn more.
Welcome to the Hired Geek Podcast, where each week we explore the impact of EdTech on the student experience with engaging, fun, and relevant conversations that honor the wide range of work happening all across the higher ed ecosystem. I'm your host, Dustin Ramsdell. I've been working in and around higher ed for the past decade focused on student support and digital experiences. Join me every week for discussions with some of the best minds in education technology. The Hired Geek Podcast is a part of the Enrollify podcast network, a robust collection of shows designed to help higher education professionals like you grow. Explore our other shows at enrollify.org or check out some of my personal favorites linked in the show notes below. Enrollify is made possible by Element 451, the leading AI-powered all-in-one student engagement platform helping institutions create meaningful, personalized, and engaging interactions with students. Learn more at element451.com. Welcome back, everyone, to another wonderful episode of the Higher Ed Geek Podcast. We are here to continue kind of a conversation that has been had recently with fellow creator on the Enrollify Podcast Network, Dave Kibbles, about international students, recruiting them, and how they are kind of encountering institutions in their search process. So we'll kind of, zig and zag through that topic, as many nuances as we can cover in the time that we have. But we'll start as we always do. Kat, if you want to introduce yourself, your professional background, and then we'll get on with the rest of our conversation here.
My name is Liendgens. I'm the CEO of Hannon Hill. And since it's somewhat relevant to our topic today, I want to point out that once upon a time, I was an international student, went to Georgia State University, and moved here from Germany many years ago. I spent most of my career in technology in various sectors, in education, in the public sector, and now in the private sector, as well as government. And so I've been with Hannon Hill for just a little over 15 years now, and absolutely love helping higher education. And that's one of the main reasons why, we've been in business for so long. Everybody in the company just really appreciates the impact that higher education has on the world and on changing people's lives. And that's our mission.
It's very like longitudinal work, like you're working with students sometimes, for a very long period of time. So it's great stuff. And kind of just similar, kind of fascination or sort of draw that I know has kept myself and many others in this space. And yeah, I mean, you mentioned you've been at working at Hannon Hill for quite some time. So I guess I'll kind of do kind of a two-parter here of just kind of explaining a little bit, just really briefly, the work that Hannon Hill does. And I guess because you've been there for such a span of time, like any sort of like anecdotes or nuances, I guess, of how the work has sort of changed or evolved or anything else, I guess, any reflections on that? I'm just curious because I think just sometimes whenever we have the luxury of having somebody who's like been with one organization, it's like, yeah, how have you sort of like navigated, especially just like over that span of time, like a lot of things have happened. So just explain a little bit about the work Hannon Hill does and I guess any reflections on your tenure there.
Our flagship product is Cascade CMS. Our customers can streamline the creation of content. They can enhance user engagement and also ensure brand consistency and compliance at the same time. And the way that we do this is by focusing on the non-technical users and helping them manage their content easily by teaching them through our products how they can make their content more effective. So we try to take the intimidation factor out of it. But we also understand that content contributors at higher education institutions, they don't come to work in the morning and log into the CMS first thing and think, well, what should I do here today, right? So they log into their email and what they want to see is action items. And so with our tool set, they get exactly the instructions that they need to make their content more effective and become better contributors and see better results at the same time. So interesting question that you posed here. What have I seen change over the years? I think many years ago, the web was primarily owned by IT, and so IT was calling all the shots, and the web teams were primarily under IT. And I'm sure you've experienced the same thing. That this has changed completely. I think higher ed has really recognized that marketing needs to own the website and the digital presence in order to achieve the results that they're looking to achieve. And so what we're seeing now is that IT is there in a support capacity for the most part, but really marketing owns the strategy, and there is an increased understanding, even from the higher ups, that the website is absolutely crucial in attracting and converting the right types of students. And that just takes a lot of thought, and that takes a lot of data, and that takes a lot of strategy. And that's kind of how our product has evolved as well. Back in the day, it was more developer heavy, whereas now we really try to talk with our customers, talk with the marketing departments to try to solve their problem specifically.
Yeah, that's great to hear. 'Cause I think there is a version that I think we're kind of approximating now. Sort of different kind of versions at different institutions, but like try to get like the best of both worlds. Like obviously you can do some pretty amazing things when you're leveraging technology to its full potential, but then bringing that sort of that marketing know-how and clear sort of goals and outcomes that you're aiming for. I think that there's just a great kind of collaboration that can happen there. And I think like it's sort of leading to like this moment where I just feel like I've been seeing people talking a lot more about web governance, so, website design, user design, and sort of student search, because likely they're ending up at one of your web pages. Hopefully they are, if they're searching for
Uh-huh.
either your institution or your program in particular, or what have you. But just like this like really great kind of renaissance of like kind of bringing the website and everything back to the forefront. And how are you creating like kind of just delightful user experiences, but also like you're saying, like data is so important on that, of like, okay, this is working well, this isn't, how can we tinker and kind of keep kind of that cycle of continuous improvement. And I think with our topic of the day of focusing in on international students in particular, that idea of leveraging all of these sort of best practices and tools and everything for that international student population, like I imagine there's no shortage of number of the kind of roadblocks and things that they might encounter. This international student just earnestly searching for a particular program or a particular institution, or both. What are some of the current roadblocks that those prospective international students are facing when they're searching for programs?
Yeah, there's lots of them, and I should maybe preface, or kind of restate the importance of attracting and converting those international students, because I think a lot of times the impact that international students have on organizations is greatly underrated. So when you look at just from an economic standpoint, the in the 2022-2023 academic year, international students actually contributed over $40 billion to the U.S. economy, and supported over 350,000 jobs. So just from that perspective, it really shows how important it is to appeal to into international community for your recruitment efforts. But then more importantly, also, we look at just the incredible impact that international students have on just diversity and bring in a global perspective, right? That is just so important, not just for them, but also for higher education institutions, because they really want to do a better job of preparing students for the professional world, which has become so much more international. And so bringing an international student or enhancing your international student body is just beneficial for everybody all around. Now, in terms of the roadblocks that international students might encounter, there's no shortage of roadblocks. I mean, first of all, it is incredibly intimidating and incredibly daunting for any international student to even consider leaving their home, leaving their family, their friends, leaving their culture, and going to a completely unknown place. A lot of times, abandoning their native language and now having to study in a language that's not their first language. And a lot of times just not being familiar with the culture other than maybe what they've seen in movies, right?
Hmm.
So that alone puts a lot of trepidation on prospective international students. And I think that alone kind of shapes the experience that they have. And so that's why it's so important to make your website very compassionate and very, very easy to navigate. And so, research has really shown the importance of having a good website. So, for example, 80% of international students, they rely primarily on university websites when deciding where to study. So, if you're able to tailor your website to international students, you can actually see massive jumps in conversion rates. So, I've heard numbers of like 30% if you just spend more time, more thought on making the experience for international students better. And you mentioned Day, who I love. She's the expert when it comes to recruiting international students and just providing an exceptional experience. And she's talked a lot about how difficult it is for a lot of international students to even find what they're looking for. So she actually challenged marketing leaders to um, navigate their site pretending to be an international student who is looking for a specific thing. And a lot of times it just takes, almost a dozen clicks to find anything that you're looking for. And a lot of times you end up in this circle where you're looking for, okay, do I go into the international student section? But is this really what I'm looking for? And now I see financial aid. Is this going to be applied to me, or is this different for international students? So that alone is very, very difficult for international students to navigate. And a lot of times they're not clear about websites are not clear about requirements, right? So it's also very, very difficult a lot of times for an international student to say, okay, well, how do I really apply? Like, what do I need to do? How do I get a transcript of or a translation of my transcript, right?
Mhm.
So there's just so much content, and Day talks about this. We try to be helpful, so we create more content. So now we have even more pages to navigate, which means more opportunity for an international student to get lost, right? So that's a major, major challenge that I've seen. There's also just a general lack of information about what to expect. And this could be anything from, okay, well, how does the cost of living compare, to my country? Maybe I don't even know how to budget for my time at the university in a different country. There's what to expect in terms of the test taking. So a lot of countries, they don't have multiple choice tests. They just have long sessions where you write essays, or you have long oral exams. So they don't even know what to expect when they come here. And all of a sudden, I definitely had that experience. The first multiple choice test that I ever took was for my uh, driver's license in Germany. And I had never taken a multiple choice until I came here, and almost everything was multiple choice. So those are just a few things. How do I drop a course? Like, what to expect from a classroom experience? So I think there's a lot of content that I think can be tailored towards international students that would make them feel a lot better. And then I guess the final roadblock that I see is that, and I alluded to this, giving up everything and studying in a different country is incredibly intimidating. And there's also a fear of just massive isolation because you don't have that supportive network anymore. So I think where a lot of universities waste opportunity, for lack of a better word, is to help establish those connections, to tell those stories of international students that are from that same country that your prospective student is, that have navigated this successfully. Put them in touch with students so that they can have exchanges. Make it easier to ask questions, not just through a contact us form, but maybe have like a live Q&A for specific regions. So all of these are things that I think could really go a long way in making things a little bit easier for international students. But those are all the roadblocks, just not finding the information that you're looking for, getting caught in this endless vortex of trying to find specific information only to be sent from page to page to page, and only to end up where you started out. And they're not seeing content that's relevant, not personalized to them at all. I think those are the major roadblocks that I'm seeing.
Yeah, vortex or a maze or whatever colorful metaphor, that idea that like, you just keep adding to it, and it's just many more like winding trails, or you're just sort of like, yeah, just getting lost in sort of the, sub menus of sub menus of sub menus of sites, or, it looks completely different because it's like, well, that page is managed by the registrar or the bursar or this person over here. Like, all these sort of like bits and pieces of information that a student is really looking for, and that like aren't sort of coherently connected, whether it's in design or sort of in the information that's presented. But I mean, just even the like implicit, this sort of as like kind of a takeaway as like an action item, I think, is like the implicit acknowledgement and empathy to that point that you made of like the culture shock, there's so many implications about like, enrolling and applying and extra things that are required. And then even just something like dropping a course does, maybe have more implications for international students and things. So I think just really being conscious of, maybe being much more kind of upfront with like, hey, we know this is going to be a hard journey. Like, we're excited that you want to take it with us, and we're going to be here for you, and really making kind of clear and powerful statements like that, and putting the structures in place and the design in place, utilize the tools to make it as easy for your team to, kind of create that journey and everything. So I think, something else I thought of, and maybe we can kind of weave this into the next answer, is like, obviously, like a student may go to, Google and say like, well, I'm looking for, this program or this institution. But even sometimes like within a site, like I find myself doing this a lot on like institutional websites, is like using the search within the website and stuff, like, so like that idea. Because if it's like, yeah, if you have this sort of like massive, maze of content, if it's just like, I'm trying to search for, financial aid or something, and it's just like the search is just kind of all gobbledygook and whatever, like it's not giving you, and that sometimes is just a symptom of the core kind of illness that is like, okay, well, we just keep adding more and more content and more, and so it's hard for, search, whether it's a Google search or like the search function that's built within our, website, to really discern what it might be that someone is looking for. So we've acknowledged some of the challenges, some of the roadblocks, and looking now for kind of the opportunities, and maybe if there's any kind of examples or things that maybe you want to share. But like, how can institutions better leverage, an existing asset like their website to better attract international students?
Yeah, that's a good question here. And it's funny that you mentioned the bursar's office. Like, it's do domestic students even really know what to do with that term?
No,
Now put
no.
yourself into the shoes of a student from China. They should not have to go through your website needing a translation service. So you do want to adjust the language if you can, and just make things easier to understand. So if you have the capacity to either have some personalization engine where you can actually simplify things and say, look, I feel like the student is visiting the site from a different country. This is likely not their native language. So we can make some suggestions on how to make that language a little bit easier to understand. Or even like give them a choice to say, okay, well, I would like to see this particular section in a different language, and here's what it is. But also giving them a choice to simplify the content. But that's just one thing that I was thinking about. But yeah, to get better results by reducing friction for international students. Luckily, there's a lot of opportunity out there. And the good thing also is that, one, a lot of the things can be done by humans. And the things that can't be done by humans, there's actually a lot of technology out there that can help you with exactly, getting the results that you need for your website and making your website a ton better for international students. So from a content standpoint, as I mentioned, make sure that you are the connection maker, right? So you should never leave an opportunity untaken to connect your international students with other international students. And again, I'll talk more about personalization, but if you have a personalization engine, leverage this, right? So if you know that this particular student is, from France, then if at all possible, connect them, show them a success story, of a student from France that has maybe gone through the exact same experience. Hook them up with either like live Q&A sessions or just a way to contact students and exchange information about their experience. Again, tell those success stories. If you have any international staff, I would highly, highly recommend leveraging that. How powerful for this student from France to see, oh, they actually have somebody in the international student office who is from France, who graduated from this university, who can help me navigate this process. That's incredibly powerful, and that also, in my experience, will not just alleviate some of the trepidation that the student feels, but also, the parents are typically pretty heavily involved in the decision making process too. So that can go a long way, just easing parents' minds as well, to see, okay, well, my child is not the first one to go through this process. There's actually people that can help, that have successfully done that. um, I think a lot of times international students, they are very interested in learning more about the culture of the country in which they will be studying. So featuring that, but also at the same time, you want to show them that you celebrate and embrace the international community. So, what can you do? Do you have any events that are going on? Do you have any clubs that are specifically for students from specific countries? So, if you have anything that shows your prospective students that you really embrace and celebrate the international community, I would put that front and center. And if you have a personalization engine, make sure that they see this. They should not have to hunt for this. And you mentioned the search. I think a very noble and aspirational goal is to eliminate the need for the search bar as much as possible, because you really want to look at the student's behavior, look at things like the geolocation, look at some of the questions that they ask, look at the search terms that they have used in the past, and look at the forms that they filled out, and really harvest that information in order to show them a very, very personalized experience. And we recently actually hosted a webinar on the topic, um, and I think one of the takeaways was that yes, there's nothing wrong with having this international student hub that I see on a lot of higher education websites, which I think it's a very nice thought and it can be very, very helpful. But a lot of your international students, they are not going to want to be contained to that section, because they want to feel that you're embracing them and that they're going to be part of the entire community. And that experience to them is reflected in the experience that they have on your website. So if I'm an international student and I just see, okay, well, I don't need to visit any of these pages or any of these sections here, because there's this little room here for me as an international student to find the information. That's typically not a great experience, and that's typically not what your international students are striving for. They really expect, especially in this day and age where personalization has become so prominent and almost expected, they really want to be able to go to any section of your site, any page, and see content that's relevant to them. So they may not search for financial aid for international students, right? They go to financial aid. Take the information that you already know about them and say, okay, well, this particular section is financial aid for domestic students, but look, here's a call to action to check out the options that are available to you. So I think that'll go a long way. Translation, as I mentioned, if you have some tools to translate content on demand, I think that's always helpful. Show them the information that you might think that everybody knows, like dropping classes or differences in test taking. Show that if you know from which country your prospective student is, and tailor that exactly to them. Just a quick side story. It's kind of funny. When I came to the United States as an international student, I ended up in a German class because so many classes were already filled up. But to me, as a native German speaker, it just really I wasn't getting anything out of the class. So my advisor said, "Oh, you can just drop the class." Well, I didn't even think to ask, how do you do this? Because in Germany, if you miss a couple of classes, you're automatically dropped. I didn't know this. And so I ended up failing the German class in my native language. So those are all things that I think a lot of times are not taken into consideration, is what does an international student not know? And then also take into account that not all international students are the same. So, there might be some different ways in which transfer credits are handled from different countries. I mentioned the cost of living. If you're an international student from Europe, you expect much, much lower grocery expenses than, when you come to the United States, for example. Again, difference in delivery formats, difference in testing, show them, some transportation options. So I think that, again, we have so many great personalization tools available to us that I think it's time to get out of the student hub and really show each particular prospective international student the content that they're looking for. And I think that instead of just creating 50 new pages in 50 different languages, there's a lot more that you can do in order to uh, keep your sanity, but also see much, much greater conversion rates.
Yeah, I mean, the personalization I think is going to be a big takeaway of like thinking through how best to get started, on that for any of our fellow marketers out there. But and I think it's even like the simplicity of language obviously like helps serve a lot of the goals of just sort of like not having kind of overstuffed pages or overly complicated, like, and even for translation purposes, like avoid using like the word bursar. It is like that idea of like you should be able to cater even just with the minimal information of like, okay, where is this person coming from and how do they find our site, start kind of the personalization there. And then like, you know I like what you said too of trying to like keep humans in the process. And I think like that idea that you can be that connector and maybe just try to like, because it could be maybe just a slight pivot from sort of the conventional thinking of like, just to like request information form and just be like, hey, well, tell us your name and what program you're interested in, and your email or phone number. Like the idea you could frame that, especially for this audience, like you're saying, is like it is going to be hugely impactful if they could talk to like a current student or a staff member or a faculty member or something that like is from the country they're from, or something like that, like the idea of just saying like, well, just tell us who you are and where you're from, like you came here, you're interested, like there is a presumption obviously that you are requesting more information, you would like to learn more, you'd like to kind of further the conversation, but that opportunity to bring people into the process as early as possible helps to uh just alleviate issues and answer questions, and just build some affinity and everything. So I think that that's could be a good way to kind of reframe like the call to action kind of piece is like, well, you're here, we've personalized this website at least a little bit to say like, well, you're not from the US, so we'll just say, again, that idea is like we don't even have to like do multiple permutations of something. It's like just acknowledge that like you are a non-US student like visiting this like landing page for prospective students, and like we can just try to personalize that information, but also like in my head is like, yeah, it'd be like so smart to just try to get them speaking to somebody that's not even like necessarily like an admissions counselor, like just somebody who can try to like who has like raised their hand to be available to engage in these conversations, to like speak to their experience coming from the same country, or just being an international student in general. So your existing asset of your website, like it is there, and you can keep kind of iterating and kind of improving upon it, versus feeling like you need to kind of spin up something completely new that's kind of different than you're used to doing. So I guess just to kind of build on that a little bit as we kind of close out here, like advice that you would give to other higher ed leaders right now, because I appreciate that you said like, I mean, there's no shortage of roadblocks for these prospective international students, but there's also like a lot of reasons why they're so valuable to institutions and to communities and to our country and everything. So like, the value proposition of like, okay, I think we'll try to like cater a little bit more to international students. Like, what advice would you give to help make sure that some of these other higher leaders are just coming at it with like the right mindset and the right strategy?
Yeah, I mean, as I mentioned, it takes people and it takes tools, and both of them are available. Personalization is absolutely mandatory in order to really deliver this level of experience that your international students and your domestic students deserve and are looking for. As I mentioned, leverage your international staff, leverage your international students, not just by being ambassadors and or by answering questions, but also ask them how their experience was. What are some of the things that they were afraid of? Like, use them as a group to explain, when you were making the decision, what was the process like? What roadblocks did you encounter when you got here? What were some of the surprises, good and bad, that you experienced? So really leverage the people that you have available at your organization, whether that's international students, whether that's current students or just international staff. Another thing that is a lot of times a little bit underrated is providing just ongoing support. So it's not just to get the international students through the door. You also want to make sure that once they're there, that they have ongoing support, whether that's orientation, thorough orientation that covers some of the things that might not be needed for domestic students, whether that is peer mentoring, in some cases, language assistance, community building events, right? So I think it is important to really provide international students with an experience that goes beyond just getting them through the door and getting them in, but show them opportunities where they can become really immersed in the culture and in the community. So there's opportunities to partner with maybe some local organizations, offering some volunteer opportunities, organizing those cultural events that I was talking about. So I think if you are able to keep your international students engaged that way, then they are a lot more likely to then become that next ambassador because they had that amazing experience and they want to pass that on and pay it forward. So I think that's really, really important. And then finally, you touched on this before, but make sure that your website conveys that you have a lot of empathy, that you understand that this is a really tough decision, and that the process that they're currently going through and the prospect of studying in a completely different country can be very intimidating. Acknowledge that and don't say, oh, this is going to be so easy, but just show some empathy. But then also through making those connections and by showing them some of the things that you're currently offering to international students, and making things easy. If you have a translation service, don't make them hunt for translation services. Show them all the things that you are doing to help reduce friction. And I think if you take all these things into account, again, through technology and through people, then I think you'll be in really good shape and you'll be able to attract and retain more international students, and not just immediately, but also retain them as really great ambassadors for your organization.
Great points. And I think just, as we're closing out, that idea of like, trying to inspire folks to take the action items here and keep them through the entire student's experience, because like getting them to be, applying and accepting and, starting at your institution is just really like the beginning of the journey. And, your website can be a tool to help engage those students with, building the community and, leveraging resources and things. And I feel like even just like, if you have like well-designed and helpful resources, like trying to be like proactive with them as well. Don't just wait for, students to try to kind of navigate through the website. So I think there's a lot of great things to think about. And I think, we've kind of like bold circled, underlined a lot of great stuff that hopefully folks will be putting into action. And, we'll have ways to connect with you and Hannon Hill in the description for the episode, so folks can hopefully keep the conversation going. But really appreciate you, coming on, taking the time, sharing all that you did and doing this work. And just, really great advice.
Thanks for having me, Dustin.
The Hired Geek Podcast is a part of the Enrollify Podcast Network. If you like this podcast, chances you like all the other Enrollify shows too. Our podcast network is growing constantly, and we've got a plethora of marketing, enrollment, and higher technology shows that are jam-packed with stories, ideas, and frameworks all designed to empower you to be a better hired professional. Our shows help you find your next big idea and feature a selection of the industry's best as your host. Learn from people like Jamie Hunt, Seth Odell, Dave Kibbolds, and Eddie Francis, as well as so many other of your favorite leaders in higher education. Enrollify is made possible by the support of Element 451, a leading AI-powered, all-in-one student engagement platform helping institutions create meaningful, personalized, engaging interactions with students. Learn more at element451.com.